It's Friday, everyone. What do we do on Fridays here at the Hint Hive? That's right, we smash the patriarchy. Hey there, my fellow powerful and badass women. Welcome back to another episode of the Hint Hive, Amplifying Women's Voices. I'm your host, Kelly Hint, Queen Bee of this hive, here to bring you another episode of inspiration, empowerment, and a bit of badassery. Today, we're discussing a topic that's as fascinating as it is frightening, the psychology behind cults. We'll talk about what makes a cult, the dangers of being in one, real-life examples, and most importantly, how to protect yourself and your loved ones. So buckle up, ladies, because this ride is about to get real. All right, let's start with the basics. What exactly is a cult? According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, a cult is a group or movement exhibiting excessive devotion or dedication to some person, idea, or thing, and employing unethical, manipulative techniques of persuasion and control. This might include isolation from former friends and family, debilitation, use of special methods to heighten suggestibility and subservience, powerful group pressures, information management, suspension of individuality or critical judgment, promotion of total dependency on the group and fear of leaving it, etc. In simpler terms, a cult is a group that uses manipulation to control its members, often under the guise of a charismatic leader or a seemingly noble cause. This manipulation can be mental, emotional, and unfortunately sometimes even physical. In recent years, I have heard people refer to supporters of former President Donald Trump as cult members, with Trump being their cult leader. Now, I make no assertions here as to the truth or falsehood of those claims. I'm simply sharing information, and I'll allow my listeners to form their own opinions. See how that works, people? Isn't freedom and having choices wonderful? Another cult accusation that I've heard before is Scientology, right? So, members of Scientology refer to it as their religion. However, there are some people who have walked away from Scientology and they claim that it is a cult. Again, I don't have enough authority to speak on whether or not that is accurate. So again, I will let you form your own opinion. So let's first dive into the psychology behind why people join cults. I mean, on the surface, you think, why would somebody do that? Well, one of the key reasons is the human need for belonging and purpose. We all want to feel like we are a part of something bigger than ourselves, and unfortunately, cults exploit this desire. They create a sense of community and shared purpose that can be incredibly appealing, especially to those who are feeling lost or isolated. I've also heard gang memberships being compared to this, not as a cult, but one of the reasons why people join a gang. That need for belonging and purpose. The need for belonging and purpose is so incredibly powerful that we can sometimes do things that are really not in our best interests. And another psychological aspect is the concept of cognitive dissonance. So this is the mental discomfort experienced by a person who holds two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values at the same time. And so cults often use this to their advantage by gradually increasing their demands, making it harder for members to leave as they become more invested. It's like when you see people really dig into their convictions when their leader has been exposed for some horrible behavior, even being convicted of something, and yet they still continue to follow because they have that cognitive dissonance in their head. They know it's wrong. Like they know this thing is wrong that this person did, but they somehow get themselves to believe that either the person never did it or the system is rigged or, the person is a victim. And that helps them to get rid of the cognitive dissonance and really, dig their feet into their initial beliefs that this person is amazing. Now, according to a study by Dr. Michael Langone, apologies if I have mispronounced your name, sir, a psychologist. Dr. Michael is a psychologist who specializes in cult studies. And he says that about 2.5 million Americans have been involved in cults at some point. That is a staggering number, and it shows just how widespread and impactful these groups can be. Now, I'm a little disappointed in that there haven't been other studies connected to this that came up for me as I was searching to talk about like the worldwide phenomenon of cults. Because again, I live here in the USA, so I'm more familiar with the happenings here. And I just wonder, are we unique? Are we as messed up as it seems to other parts of the world? As a matter of fact, my listeners in other countries, Germany and Italy, you seem to be kicking butt with your downloads of my episodes. So feel free to send me a text and let me know. In your countries, have you experienced any kind of cult phenomenons? As far as in the US, I have a couple of real life examples. So let's get into them. One of the most infamous cults is the People's Temple, led by Jim Jones. This cult started with very noble intentions, promoting racial integration and social justice. Sounds great, right? But it ended tragically in 1978 with the mass suicide of over 900 members in Jonestown. Another example of a cult is the Manson family, led by Charles Manson in the late 1960s. There are some of you listening who may be incredibly familiar with this if you were growing up in the 60s. Manson convinced his followers to commit heinous murders, including the brutal killing of actress Sharon Tate. He used drugs, psychological manipulation, and his charismatic personality to control his followers. That's one of those qualities that you often see, is that very charismatic personality of the cult leader. And more recently, right here in my own state, we have the NXIVM cult, led by Keith Rainier. This group posed as a self-help organization, but was actually a front for a secret society where women were branded, yes, branded, and forced into sexual slavery. Rainier was convicted on multiple charges, including sex trafficking and racketeering, in 2019. So, what makes cults so dangerous? I mean, if you just listen to the 3 examples I gave, it's pretty obvious. But let's dig a little bit deeper into that. So, for starters, they strip away individual autonomy. Members often lose their ability to think critically and make decisions for themselves. This can lead to severe psychological damage, including depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And Now, again, I don't want to seem like I am trying to influence anyone one way or another, but I'm going to give an example, and please take it for what it's worth. I'm not saying anything about whether this is related to cult activity. I'm just trying desperately to find an example that people will understand. So, for example, when I talk to people who only listen to one news outlet, pick one, pick Fox, pick MSN, whatever, just pick one. I'm not going to name one. But when all they do is listen to one source of news, all of a sudden, all of these different people listening to the same source, all they do is regurgitate talking points. It drives me crazy. Absolutely crazy. Have a free thought in your head. Do not give to me the Fox News talking points. Do not give to me the CNN talking points. I want to hear what your thoughts are, what your feelings are on this. So again, I am not saying that people who watch Fox or CNN or MSN are in cults. I'm simply trying to share an example of how people are losing their ability to think critically and make decisions for themselves. If all you're doing is regurgitating what you hear, and I'm telling you, I have, as a therapist, I have spent 8 hours in one day hearing people say the same thing over and over and over. Granted, not in recent years, because I don't have a full caseload of people who believe the same thing, but in the past, in certain areas, I have heard people say the literal exact same thing, not because it's factual pieces of information, but because they are just regurgitating what is being shoved down their throats. So let's move on before I dig myself into a hole that I can't get out of. Because again, people, I'm not saying what you think I'm saying. I'm not saying anything, just trying to help people understand. Okay, enough of that. So cults also isolate their members from the outside world, including friends and family. This isolation makes it even harder for members to leave, as they have no support system to turn to. And honestly, financial exploitation is another common danger, as cults often demand large sums of money from their members. And then physically, cults can be incredibly dangerous as well. Many engage in abusive practices, including forced labor, sexual exploitation, and even violence. And then in extreme cases like Jonestown, they can lead to mass suicide or murder. And so I think it's worthy of mentioning that the participation in cults or cults themselves should kind of be viewed on a spectrum, right? Not everything is as extreme and dangerous as Jonestown, Manson, NXIVM. Like, not everything is that extreme. Waco, Texas, it is another that I remember from my childhood. Those are extreme versions of cults. You can have culty behaviors that maybe blur the lines. You can have cult-like situations that maybe don't quite fit the entire definition of a cult, or you could have something that truly is a cult that's maybe a little more mild, right? Like, for those, and again, apologies if anyone out there is in Scientology, I am not trying to say you're in a cult at all, because I don't have enough information about that to make that determination, and I'm not an expert on cults. But for those who say that Scientology is a cult, if you compare Scientology to Charles Manson and his cult following, Scientology is not recommending that people go out and kill one another, right? So if, in fact, Scientology is a cult, and I'm not saying that it is or is not, but if it is, it would probably be considered maybe a minor one compared to the Manson family or Jim Jones and all his nonsense, right? So what are the warning signs? Like, how do you know if you're in a cult? How do you know if your loved one is in a cult? So let's talk about the warning signs. So here are a few red flags to look out for. Like a big one, and this is pretty dramatic, but sudden personality changes. So if your loved one suddenly becomes very secretive, paranoid, or starts acting very differently, it could be a sign. It could also be the sign of mental illness, but again, for the purposes of this conversation, we're talking about cults. And then we've got isolation from friends and family. Cults often encourage members to cut ties with their previous social circles. It's very, when you think about abusive relationships, it's very similar, right? Like if you have somebody who's physically abusing their partner, quite often one of those behaviors is to pull their partner away from their friends and family to keep them isolated so that they can't get help. And then there's unquestioning commitment. Blind loyalty to a leader or group, even in the face of clear evidence of wrongdoing, is a major red flag. I want to highlight that shit. Whoops. Highlight that crap. There. I fixed it so that I don't have to label this as explicit. Hopefully I covered it and I don't get in trouble. Anyway, speaking of blind loyalty. So I see this in many areas of life. And so I do want to say, just because somebody has unquestioning commitment and blind loyalty towards someone or something does not necessarily mean that thing is a cult. I have seen this, for example, in politics. Think of people who are blindly loyal to a party, either the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the Libertarian Party. Like, if you are voting party line only and it's blind loyalty, no matter what the politicians do, again, not saying that's cultish, but that's a crappy behavior. Think for yourselves. Again, I'm not saying that everybody who votes party line is blind or not thinking for themselves. You could simply vote for a certain party just because their philosophies in general are more in line with yours, but don't try to tell me that certain people are fabulous humans. Like, please acknowledge that that people are flawed. Nobody's perfect. So again, I need to get away from this because I'm going to start saying things that are going to really piss people off. So let's talk about financial exploitation. So if people are being pressured to donate large sums of money or sell their possessions, it's a cause for concern. It really is. And then extreme secrecy, that's a huge problem. If your friends, family members, or yourselves are unwilling or unable to discuss this group that they're involved in openly, something might be wrong. And again, it's not people not wanting to talk politics or religion. I'm not saying that at all, but the demands for secrecy are problematic in certain scenarios. So if you suspect that someone is in a cult, Make sure that you approach the situation with empathy and support. Don't criticize or judge them, as this can push them further away and further into the cult. Because what did we talk about at the beginning? Part of being vulnerable to becoming a cult member is that this cult really engages its members to feel a sense of belonging. So if you're trying to talk to somebody because you think they're in a cult, if you show judgment and you're crappy towards them, it will push them further away. You have to draw them back. Encourage open communication. Provide a safe space for them to express their feelings. Don't judge them. Don't treat them like crap. That's why I could never understand when, like going to church, if there's like hate speech going on in church or like really coming down hard on certain groups of people and using language of hate, language of judgment in a really crappy way, how on earth are you going to get people to believe if you're telling your flock that, you know, their brother's a piece of crap because he's gay? Like, come on. We don't need that. We need more love in the world. All right. I'm climbing down off the soapbox to get back to the topic at hand. So for those who find themselves in a cult and want to get out, here are some practical tips. It's you know, just a short list, and it's not extensive at all, but just some basics. Seek professional help. There are actually therapists out there who specialize in cult recovery, and they can be incredibly helpful. I am not one of those. I do not specialize in cults. I'm fascinated by them. I'm fascinated behind the psychology, or the psychology behind cults, but I am not a specialist. And so if somebody needed a specialist, you don't always need a specialist depending on the level that you're in, but I would encourage you to find somebody who specializes if you're really sucked in and having a hard time getting out. Or if you have escaped and you really need somebody who knows how to treat the problems associated with the aftermath of cult membership, definitely seek a specialist. And of course, reach out to support networks, friends, family, former cult members. They can provide much needed love and support. And of course, educate yourself. Understanding the psychological manipulation tactics used by cults can empower you to break free and plan your exit. Leaving a cult can be risky, so it's important to plan your departure carefully, much like leaving a violent relationship. Ensure that you have a safe place to go and people that you can trust. Now, ladies, as women, we have the power to protect ourselves and each other from the dangers of cults. By staying informed, supporting one another, and fostering open communication, we can create a strong network of resilience. Ladies, we are stronger together. Remember, our strength lies in our unity and our unwavering commitment to our own autonomy and empowerment. Let's keep lifting each other up and staying vigilant against those who seek to exploit our need for connection and purpose. We should be doing this anyway, separate from culty crap, right? As women, we need to do a better job of supporting each other. And I say that not as somebody who is experiencing personally lack of support, but as somebody who goes online and reads the trash in the comments section. Wow, ladies, some of us are brutal to each other. I'm guessing that it's not anyone listening to this podcast. I'm guessing it would be the people who hate this podcast, who stand against everything I stand for. So, when I say let's do a better job, it is going to fall on all the wrong ears, because if you are listening to this podcast, you are already doing a great job. I know this because you wouldn't be connecting with this podcast if you were a pile of crap who does not believe in supporting and uplifting one another. So, from my heart to yours, listeners, thank you for not being piles of crap. All right, my hive. That's it for today's episode of the Hint Hive, Amplifying Women's Voices. I hope you found this discussion interesting, enlightening, and maybe a little bit empowering. And of course, if you or someone you know needs help, don't hesitate to reach out to professionals or support networks. As always, stay strong, stay fierce, and keep amplifying your voice. Until next time, I'm Kelly Hint, and I am honored that you have spent your precious time with me today. This podcast is powered by Kelly Hint Empowerment Coaching, as well as Kelly M. Hint LMHC and The Cranky Counselor. To find out more about coaching services, head over to CoachKellyHint.com. If you'd like to know more about the psychotherapy services I offer to individuals within the state of New York, you can check out KellyMHint.com. And if you'd like to learn more about aromatherapy, you can check out TheCrankyCounselor.com.